I'm Joshua and I'm an INTP, and first and foremost I would like to say thank you for viewing this video. The topic of this video will be on knowledge. I smile because knowledge is instinctively and inherently my favorite subject and primary concern in orientation in life. So I get no more joy in being an INTP than talking about what we know and what we don't know, and what I know, and I say we as in the collective world, not that I know every body of knowledge out there in facts, but I say we as a collective world because I feel instinctively connected to that fraternity of knowledge, and I myself and what I know. Now, what may surprise people, and I've alluded to this, and sorry, I'm going to adjust the camera because I don't like the eye angle. What I'm going to talk about in this video, and I alluded to it in a previous video. Well, I didn't allude to it. I just specifically talked about NTPs and skepticism. Excuse me, or really just in doubt, and doubt being a completely underlying aspect to the NTP's cognitive landscapes. Because there's not, I mean, I like certainty, but there's not many things I'm certain of. And so I would like to begin this discussion with an anecdote. I was with a group of friends, and we're all sitting around and talking and eating, and one friend makes a comment about a turtle. Basically, they said the turtle can't count. And I said, how do you know the turtle can't count? She's like, well, the turtle can't count. Turtles don't count. As in, they don't say 1, 2, 3, 4. And I said, well, the only reason you're assuming turtles can't count is because by way of us knowing that people can count is that we vocalize it and express it, or we have written syntactical or symbol systems to show that we count. We have symbols for numbers, and we can write them on a piece of paper and show that we can count something, or we can demonstrate something with our hands and with our voice and showing that we're counting something, or we can point to things and say 1, 2, 3, 4 things are there. We can represent counting, but just because we can represent counting as a neurological phenomenon, does that mean that because the turtle can't represent counting as a neurological phenomenon or something that's going on in its mind, that it doesn't count? And what I was saying is just that because the turtle doesn't express that it doesn't look at, that it looks at the environment and doesn't notice these objects in it and a collection of these objects being in the environment, doesn't mean it doesn't do that. And I said, you don't know. And she got really upset, and a lot of people got upset with me, but it's just that I'm alright. I said, don't get upset. There's nothing wrong with not knowing things. There's not as much certainty in the world as we would like to think that there is. There's nothing wrong with not knowing something, and I voice what I don't know all the time. And in fact, if I ever become socially or politically geared, I would start a movement where we talked about just as much about what we don't know as much as we talk about what we do know. Because I think talking about just as much as talking about what you don't know in correspondence with what you do know is pertinent and important for intellectual inquiry and having unfettered and uncorrupted lines of communication between domains of knowledge, governmental systems, hierarchies, you name it. And from people to people, I think that saying what you don't know is just as important. But I voiced that. Nobody could get on with what I was saying, and lo and behold, an INTP in a social situation puts himself in a pickle by just talking about what seems reasonable. And so it led me to realize something which I already knew before. Just people do not think about knowledge structures the way I think about knowledge structures. I am fundamentally an epistemologist, and I've said this in other videos. But me being an epistemologist, it makes me see the limitations to things just as much as I see the capabilities to things. And I fundamentally believe that there are limitations to human reasoning and understanding, and that science and mathematics and logic and certain other apparatuses exist as a means for us to try and overcome these limitations, but because these limitations derive from the human mind or a collection of minds to begin with, there's limitations to them in of themselves, and that's something that David Hilbert proved. There's just limitations to knowledge, period. It's why I don't understand why people are so confident in asserting things, and I won't be as confident, even if I can project my voice, which I've learned to do from speech and debate, being on my college speech and debate team, and it's a device of rhetoric and something that's privy to me, given practicing extroverted feeling and trying to better integrate it, because when I first started these videos, people complained that they were too low and I'm speaking far too low, because I don't really like to project myself. It's because there's a sense of uncertainty and doubt in what I say, and I'm not all that. I'm confident when I come to a conclusion, but I'm not certain of the conclusion. Confidence and certainty are fundamentally two different things for me. Certainty is reality, confidence is a feeling. So that doesn't mean anything. They have no confidence and certainty. Certainty has personal meaning to me, but confidence doesn't. If somebody says something confidently or says something rather impishly, I'm only looking at what they actually say. I'm an NT, so I don't really care about the presentation of a thing. I care about what is. I don't really give a crap about the appearances. But that's not how most people are. So it's just moving from that. It's just to say that knowledge. I don't understand why people don't see its limitations. Why people don't see the limitations of reason. Why people don't see the limitations of logic. Why people don't see the limitations of facts. Why people don't see the limitations of measurement. Why people don't see the limitations of faith. Everything is limited in so many dimensions and angles because we're human beings and fundamentally we're limited. These things arose from us. One can even say that the feeling of faith is something that is given from on high, and I will go ahead and concede, because I've had this discussion with many people, I'll go ahead and concede that it is, but okay, you're saying that it is, but how are you differentiating that the mechanism exists? You're differentiating it through your subjective experience. How in that subjective experience are you not mistaking that impulse or that feeling? How are you not mistaking that impulse or that feeling for something else? The way that the conscious represents things is fairly complex, and just because you have a strong sense of knowing or leaning or even inclination of something doesn't mean that the mechanism is making it up or saying exactly what's going on and what it is. So much in what we look at as people, given just our senses and without the aid of instrumentation and comparative analyses with quantification, so taking numbers and running them together and looking at things, we can get a general idea. We look at the peripheries of an event. So we can look at the peripheries of an event and see sort of how it's manifesting and spreading itself out in the environment on a large scale. So we have this sort of macro, our minds naturally have this sort of macro logial approach. We think of things in very strong causal ways and are looking for this thing, implying this thing in a very strict manner, and taking and making conclusions in that way, and it allows us to get the big picture, but the big picture does not account for the details. And as been said in sort of wisdom's history, the devil is in the details, and just what that little idiom means is that details will make and break you. Details are what constitutes reality. It may seem biased as me being an INTP and saying that details constitutes reality, but it's just that, or at least the way we like to represent things, good Lord knows I don't know what reality is, but I know that at least insofar as how we conceive it now, two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom makes water, but you add another oxygen atom or you add another hydrogen atom, you got a different atomic structure. It just takes, atomic structures, just look at it. It just takes moving just pulling something or adding something, you get something completely different. Mutations in the genetic strands, you just pull away something or add something, point mutations. I mean, you get cascading effects. It's just the details, the small incremental things say something about the larger picture and how something is actually showing up. The why for what is, more so than the big picture is. The big picture is good for us to manipulate. It's something that's really nice for us to grab a hold onto and use and manipulate to get results. But if you're trying to figure out what actually is going on and why something is, or what the truth is, it's just what the truth is. You can't do it by looking at the periphery of a situation. It's where we even come up with the word insight, or somebody being insightful. It's just that there's a necessary means of going into something, going beyond the big picture to very nuanced and specific details, and even being close to coming to an accurate description. And then it is a description at that. It's not even really what it is. You can't talk about the phenomenon. You can describe the phenomenon. So I should say this. You can't say what the phenomenon is. You can talk about the phenomenon, and you can describe it, but you can't really say for sure what it is. I suppose it's just the point of this video is you can't really know anything. Not to the level of confidence that so many people feel as if they know things, or think even as if they know things. I mean, it's just, this is even in myself. I think I have things, there's some things I'm certain of. There's some truths that I'm convinced of, but just because I'm convinced of them doesn't mean it's not going to change in the future, or isn't even necessary for it to change in the future. And the fact that facts will change, it's not that facts don't change. It's a question of when and why and how, because they will change. It's just, I don't think that you can know in the way that we spontaneously accept the word knowing, or one has a deep sense of knowing. And it's not something that ever comes up with me, but I'm realizing more and more it comes up in most personality types and with most people. Just don't be, so many of my friends, they don't like talking to me because they're just like, you don't like certainty. It's not that I don't like certainty. I like certainty. I'm just not as sure of it as you are. I like being certain about things because I'm a homo sapien. I mean, just the way my mind is constructed up, it wants to be certain of things. It likes to be in the seat of the feeling of certainty. It likes that, but I'm not mistaking my sort of internal liking for something as an accurate description of reality, or just for the facts themselves. Just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean anything about reality. It doesn't mean anything at all. But that's like me being an NT, and that means shock some enough viewers in me saying that, or if anybody's looking at this. I think you can, I just say this, insofar as why, even as having the belief structures I have, that I don't really, I'm not combative with a lot of people. I shouldn't say not combative. I do not write off things as quickly and with such vigilance and vigorous intent like as most people do. I'm not going to say anything is completely wrong to most extents. If I say something's completely wrong, I'm saying in light of this or in light of that, given this or given that, just as a comparative measure, trying to pull some correspondence between two things that should be related. This doesn't mean that they are. It's like, I'm not saying that, just toss out everything you've heard me say up to this point, but I'm just saying that, I don't know, given just this, because I just came back from hanging out, I just had this is a thought, I just say, just given just this, interaction and these thoughts, I thought I would share them and just tell me, do you think a turtle can count? I think, and so maybe now I'll give an argument for why I think turtles can count. So why I think turtles can count? Because turtles are organisms. So, alright. So what is counting, I suppose? Counting is the brain's way of, it's the brain, when it represents things, it represents objects in groups. Counting just seems to be taking the brain's means of representing objects insofar as it says, shows 4, 3, 2, 1 of something. It shows a thing and then it tries to reiterate the representation of that thing and another thing. And you see if two things appear the same way, then you think you have two of the things. Hopefully that wasn't convoluted, but it's just saying the brain makes a representation and it will multiply that representation if the right sort of information is there in the environment. So the brain counting is just is sort of abstracting this ability for the brain to create representations of things in the environment. I think if a turtle can make mental representations, and a turtle has to be able to make enough mental representations in order to survive. So a turtle, would it be necessary for a turtle to realize there's one jellyfish here or two jellyfish here, and how far apart these jellyfish are in terms? And I'm thinking of the large shell sea turtles when I'm thinking of this. But so large shell sea turtles, they eat jellyfish, and so it's like they would have to be able to recognize that there are at the very least 3 to 4 jellyfish in this vicinity, and these 3 to 4 jellyfish are roughly this distance apart from one another. So by going for jellyfish number 3 over jellyfish number 2 or jellyfish number 1 or 4, I have a better chance in getting something to eat. For those reasons, I think a turtle on the basic level can count. Can a turtle get to 100? I don't think so. A turtle doesn't need to get to 100, but we have to realize that even just the means of counting is something that is evolutionarily necessary insofar as a survival mechanism or a way for us to make decisions in the environment so that we're successful. Humans, man, we're so dang anthropomorphically arrogant that we just think we have these higher order faculties don't arise from lower ordered systems. And it's like you got a reptilian brain stacked on top of a mammalian brain, and there your rational brain is. But it's like the reptilian and mammalian brain, it's shooting and spreading itself up like a vine-like structure through the rational brain. And your rational brain, the only thing it does is just takes what these centers, the lower order centers of your brain come up with and remember and make sense of it and make decisions with it and impede it or tell it go or future sight with it or just plan or think ahead with it. It's not what you think it is. Your rational mind is not what you think it is. And the turtles, I mean, they have the same dang brain. Well, they don't have the same brain, but they have a brain very similar to ours. It's smaller, but man, they need the basic. You're looking at any mammal, and so far as like to be able to get through the environment and not die, they need the basic structures of being able to count, see, do depth perception, which is where measurement and depth perception, spatial orientation, depth perception and spatial orientation, it seems to be where measurement arises from, or distance, just our concept of distance, just these things that we've sort of dressed and put these very fixed and necessary terminology on, I think misleads us into the origins of where these things arise and just how not special and different we are in some respects. I just say that anything a person can do And most mammals, especially primates, can do but worse. Like, they can't do it exactly like we can, but they can do something fairly similar to it, but worse. I suppose just all I'm saying is that don't be so sure of some things. Like, don't be so sure of some things. It's just, there's certainty. You shouldn't just spontaneously accept it. Take the necessary distance and the step back at sometimes in what you're saying or what you're thinking and what you're reasoning, and just ask yourself some questions about it and see if it really makes sense given other things. But it's just to say, knowledge, just in the way that we spontaneously think about it and accept it, has limitations. It's always, I'm an epistemologist, so I'll just say there's always structures that knowledge emerges from or within. You have to have some axioms and some assumptions, and then things arise out of those axioms and assumptions being wedded together. That's what knowledge essentially is for people. And so long as at the bottom there are axioms, assumptions sewn together, there's just a ground and there's a ceiling. There's a literal dimension to it. And if something has dimensions, it means it's not dimensionless. It means it's not without bound and not without limitation. It means it's not perfect, essentially. So you just have to be able to put that in your mind in some respect. Well, maybe, I'm not telling people what to do. I would just wish sometimes that people would put that in their mind in some respects when they're saying things, or just when they're thinking things. I mean, like, I'm a scientist, but I dang well recognize the limitations of science, and I'm not a believer in scientism. But then again, if you talk to people who talk to me, they think I'm crazy. So, just whatever. Those are my two. Well, they don't think I'm crazy. They just think I'm eccentric. You talk to some of my teachers and some of my lab partners, and they don't understand where I'm coming from a lot of times. Because sometimes the way I talk, even, it makes it seem like I hate science. And I love science. I love mathematics. And I love the heck out of science, irrationally, with a very strong passion and fervor. I love knowledge with a very strong passion and fervor. I mean, I pursue it and go after it and discipline myself and try and attain mastery insofar as a critical thinker, a theoretical scientist, and a mathematician. But does that make me believe, because I'm trying to achieve mastery in these fields, that one, what I'm understanding and achieving now isn't going to change? I mean, insofar as that there won't be something that comes around later that will make what I do or what I know insignificant in respects to it. No, I don't believe that, and I don't believe that just because I'm doing something means it means something. It means something to me insofar as I create meaning, but does that mean that there's some objective something out there? I think meaning's objective insofar as people need it. Universally, meaning is a fundamental human need, but it don't have the sort of room for it as many other people do, per se, because I just recognize the limitations on human understanding, and even my own understanding and ability to conceive and know things. And so, yeah, that's just my on knowledge is what this video will be called, though it ran through several gamuts of things, and just, I don't know, just share your relationship with knowledge. Just what do you think about certainty, really? I suppose just say it's on knowledge and certainty. I love knowledge, and I like certainty. I don't really love certainty because it means there's nothing else to explore, but I really do enjoy it and like it and have a great sense of esteem when I feel like I finally arrived at the answer. But it doesn't mean, just because I think that, doesn't mean that's true, man. It's like, that doesn't mean that at all. Possibly, most likely, you can only talk about likelies. You can't talk about what is a lot of times, but let's talk about a definition, and then we're creating something, and that's fine. But just realize when you do that, you're creating a system, and therefore you just cut off a whole chunk of reality, therefore in defining something. It's sort of the paradox of knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge and consciousness, because you do have to make distinctions to even get somewhere. You sort of have to close the door on other possibilities to even arrive at conclusions. So it's like, why do you think that you're getting just objective reality given that? I don't understand it. Or any more than a description of what that model and that representation of reality is portraying. This is a description. But anyways, that's my video, and hopefully you found it interesting. Maybe not insightful, maybe you don't completely agree with it, but hopefully you found it interesting. Thank you for watching.